Hey folks, in this video example we are going to cover 4 topics. First, we're going to talk about installing Google Tag Manager. Then we're going to talk about configuring the interfaces to push events to Google Tag Manager. Third, we're going to talk about how to configure Google Analytics 4 to receive these events. And fourth, we're going to talk about how to configure specific events within Google Tag Manager. All right, in this first section, we're going to talk about installing Google Tag Manager. And I'm going to log into MetaLocator, and I'm also going to log into Google Tag Manager, as you can see here. Google Tag Manager needs to be installed within a MetaLocator interface. So the first thing I'm going to do after I log into MetaLocator is to go to Interfaces, and then I'm going to click on the interface that I am going to add Google Tag Manager to. In this case, I'm going to click on Rich Media, and I'm going to let that open. And while that's opening, I'm going to switch over to Google Tag Manager, and I'm going to open up the Tag Manager workspace that I'm going to be using for this. I'm going to go to Admin. I'm going to click on the Admin tab and then click on Install Google Tag Manager. That's going to give me 2 pieces of code. One of them is labeled to put in the head, and the other is labeled to put immediately after the opening body tag. So I'm going to copy the first one, and then I'm going to switch back over to MetaLocator, and then under Advanced Settings on the left, I'm going to go to the Custom Head tag, and I'm going to paste in the Google Tag Manager code. Then I'm going to switch back to the Tag Manager, and I'm going to copy the second portion of code, switch back into MetaLocator, and then paste that into the opening body tag. And then I'm going to hit Save. And that's all there is to installing Google Tag Manager in MetaLocator. Now that we've got Google Tag Manager installed, the next thing we want to do is actually start pushing some events to Google Tag Manager. And one way that we can do that is via the data layer. The data layer is a relatively standard way that Google Tag Manager can receive data from outside applications. And based on things that occur on the data layer, you can trigger other tags. And that's normally how analytics events are moved from MetaLocator to Google Analytics via Google Tag Manager. In order to start sending those events, there's a couple settings that we need to change, and we can do that under Interface Settings, under the under the Analytics tab. When you go to the Analytics tab, most of the settings are not shown. If you expand the More Analytics features, you'll see a series of options that we are going to want to enable. The first one that we want to enable is the Enable Cross-Domain Analytics via Google Tag Manager support. Set that to Yes. The next thing we want to do is to push events to the data layer. That's the option Google Tag Manager Push Events to the data layer. Set that to Yes. Don't set the Google Analytics ID. That's for Universal Analytics only. So the only ones that you want to say yes in this case are Enable Cross-Domain Analytics via Google Tag Manager support, and then push events to the data layer. Go ahead and save the settings. And now what we want to do is verify that this is communicating. What should happen when we trigger various events within MetaLocator is we should see those events in Google Tag Manager, and that's what we're going to test right now. The way that we test that is with Google Tag Manager's preview mode, which is really cool. They have a way of allowing you to make changes in your Google Analytics, or within Google Tag Manager without actually pushing any of those changes live. So I'm going to go back to my workspace, and I haven't made any changes to this yet. I've simply installed it in MetaLocator, and I'm going to go ahead and preview. And it's going to ask me where I'd like to preview that. The way that I like to preview this is on the page that it's installed on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the MetaLocator website where this is installed. In your setup, you're going to do this on the page that you've installed MetaLocator on. So this interface we're working on is actually installed on this page. It's metalocator.com/demos/rich-media template. Notice we've got the MetaLocator interface, the same one that we're working on, installed on this page. So in your setup, this URL is going to probably be your website /locator that you're building. So I'm going to copy that URL and keep it in my clipboard. And so when I go to click preview, Google Tag Manager is going to ask me for that URL. So I'm going to go ahead and click preview so we can see what we can see. This is where it's going to ask me for that URL. I'm going to paste in the URL and click connect. Google Tag Manager is going to connect, and it's going to show what's called a little tag assistant window, and that's just to let me know that the tag assistant has been connected. Make sure that you see this, because this helps you be sure that the tag assistant is connected in both places. In this case, MetaLocator's website has the same tag manager installed as we've put in the interface, which is really common. So I want to be clear about what's happening here. Tag manager is actually being loaded twice, once inside the MetaLocator interface and once on the page that it's being hosted on. That's a relatively common setup where the same tag manager is being used on the host page as is being used in MetaLocator. And how Google handles this is they show a different shape and color so that you can distinguish the events in the preview. That'll make more sense in a minute, but I wanted to let you know that's why we're seeing two tag assistant windows. So let's go back to the tag assistant. It'll say, hey, it's been connected, and we can go ahead and click continue. So notice we've got this yellow circle and this blue diamond. Yours may be different. It's totally okay. They're kind of assigned at random, and that corresponds to events in this case that are happening on the host page versus events that are happening inside the locator. In this video, we're focused on events that are occurring inside the locator, and those are indicated by this yellow circle, and it's labeled according to the interface name. So rich media template, that's actually the name of the page this is installed on. Yours would probably be something more like, store locator, and then rich media, that would be the name of your locator. And so these are the events that have occurred inside the MetaLocator interface already. Some of the events that MetaLocator sends, they all begin with ML underscore, and there's one that's occurred already, ML underscore search. That one occurs when the AutoFind system performs a search based on the user's location. And so ML underscore search was already triggered right when we loaded the page. The next thing I want to do is trigger another event. Let's do like the directions event. That's a relatively common one. So I can click on that, and then if I switch back over to this, I should see a directions event occur in just a second. And what I can see here is you can see the ML click event has occurred. That's where we clicked on the directions. And then we can also see this open marker window event that triggered as a result of the click on the card. In this particular interface, when you click on these cards, these pop-up windows open, that's called a marker window. And so as people move around, you'll actually see quite a few of those marker window events occur. And actually, one thing I noticed here is I'm clicking around in the one that the Tag Manager demo or Tag Manager preview is not connected to, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. That can get very confusing. You want to make sure that you're performing these tests in the locator that has the Tag Assistant window opened up. So if I click on this and I click on Details, we should see Details. You see Open Marker Window. You see these click events occurring. I can click on other things to see the types of events that occur. So you can see and make sure that you're looking at the right window. So we popped open a new window in that case, and so that shows up in that green circle. But you can see all these click events occurring, a details event occurring. And so this confirms correct connection between MetaLocator and Google Tag Manager. So the good news is we've got these events showing up, we've got open marker window, we've got all these ML click events occurring. And then in the next video, we're going to talk about how we can turn these click events into analytics actions. In this video example, we're going to talk about creating the Google Analytics 4 configuration tag within Google Tag Manager. And this will make sure that the events that you create in the data layer can be used to trigger events in GA4. I've logged into my Google Tag Manager, and the first thing I'm going to do is make a new tag. And the tag I'm going to create is a GA4 configuration tag. This is the tag that is going to be used to that will be where all these events get directed towards. And so the measurement ID is going to be given to you by Google, but just make sure that when you create a Google Analytics 4 configuration, that you specify the measurement ID that you were assigned when you created the GA4 property. And so you don't have to change any of these other settings for MetaLocator's purposes, but you may have other settings that for your own needs, you may need to manipulate some of these settings. Most customers don't need to change any of that at all. And the other thing you need to make sure is that you're going to trigger this tag every time the page loads. One thing that you can do is click on triggering and just choose all pages. That will make sure that Google Analytics 4 is loaded on every page that you have. And then go ahead and click Save. And that's all there is to configuring the GA4 Analytics configuration tag. In this video example, we're going to talk about now creating the Google Analytics 4 events based on those events that occurred in the GTM data layer, and creating those events within GA4 so that we can actually get some analytics data out of this. And so before we get started, we're just going to log into Google Tag Manager first, and then I'm also going to log into Google Analytics. I'm going to go to the admin view in Google Analytics, and then I'm going to choose debug view. And then this is where we're going to see these events occur. It actually takes 24 hours for events to appear in your reports. And so if you're setting this up, you really have to use this debug view so that you can actually see what's happening as you make changes. Otherwise, you'd have to wait 24 hours for anything to occur. So we'll come back to that in a minute. Just make sure that you're logged in there. We're going to actually pick an event to listen to. So you remember in the previous videos, we've triggered actions to be pushed to the data layer within Google Tag Manager. And the whole idea of doing that is so we can use those triggers to execute tags within GTM that will actually create analytics events that we can then report on. So what we're going to do first here is we are going to create a new tag, and we are going to choose the GA event tag. So go ahead and click New. I'll call this we're going to focus on click to call. I've made a couple of these, so I'm going to call this one Demo. The tag configuration is going to be GA4 event. Make sure you don't choose the Universal Analytics or anything else. We're focusing on GA4 events. And then it's going to ask us which configuration we want to set. You should have only one here. Some people will have one associated with the that might be different based on their website or something like that. But in this case, this will be the only GA4 tag that you find. I'm going to name this event ML_click-to-call. The idea here is that you should be able to identify those events that are coming from MetaLocator, and so I prefix them with ML_click-to-call. Now we want to figure out when we want to trigger this event, and this is the whole reason why we set up that data layer, is so that we can listen to those events that automatically come off the data layer. So let's go and choose a trigger to make that happen, and we're going to create a new trigger, and that's going to look at the data layer. And so we'll call this the data layer click to call. And the tag configuration is actually going to be a custom event, and it's going to look at ML_click-to-call. And it's not going to happen on all events. It's actually just going to happen on some events, and that's for the event to be equal to ML_click-to-call. And then go ahead and click Save. So our trigger is now set up to look for events that are coming to the data layer called ML_click-to-call. That ML_click-to-call comes from MetaLocator, and so that place where it actually says that it's equal to click-to-call, that's important. That ML_click-to-call exactly match the event that actually shows up in your Tag Manager preview. We'll go through the entire process here in just a minute. So now that we've got the tag configuration set up, I'm going to go ahead and hit save, and then I'm going to go ahead and click preview again. And I'm going to, I've got a couple extra windows here with directions and such. I actually will close this preview and I will start a new preview. And it's going to ask me which preview to connect to. I'm going to paste in the full URL of the page that I've got MetaLocator installed on. It's going to open that up. And I can see that my tag assistant is connected correctly. Let's go back over here and just click continue. And I'm going to see that I've got the rich media showing up. And let's just perform a couple test events. So I should see a couple open marker window events occur here within Google Tag Manager. So there we got open marker window. And now I'm going to click on the phone number a couple times and to initiate that click to call event. So I'm going to click that a couple times just to kind of populate the activity a little bit. I'm going to go over to my tag assistant and I see ML_ click to call occurring. And so that's me verifying that all this stuff is working correctly. Now I want to show you something that's pretty cool that's happening over here in debug view. Notice those events are coming in. They come in a few seconds later, depending on just the latency that's occurring. But all those events are actually coming through to the debug view, which is awesome. That's exactly what we were trying to do, and we can see the top events that are coming through. And so that is confirmation that we have set up a click to call event that we are now seeing in debug view, and those will show up in our reports tomorrow. So they're not going to show up in reports yet, but they will show up in this debug view. And that's all there is to creating a GA4 tag that will listen to a MetaLocator provided event within the interface. There might be events that MetaLocator doesn't create a off-the-shelf data layer event for. In the next video, we're going to talk about creating custom events for your custom calls to action. Well, if you've made it this far, you've set up Google Tag Manager, you've configured your GA configuration tag, and you're pushing events from MetaLocator to Google Tag Manager via the data layer, and you're also seeing some events in Google Analytics from those pushes to the data layer. Now, you may have some actions that occur in MetaLocator that don't have a specific data layer event attached to them. And so sometimes those are clicks on things that we simply don't have a built-in event for, or they may be custom elements that you added to the locator. In any case, those click actions and other actions can also be used as triggers. So far we've talked about using events pushed to the data layer as the trigger. In this video, we're going to talk about custom triggers that can be used to capture other events that MetaLocator doesn't necessarily know about off the shelf. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to identify the trigger. In this example, we are going to be focused on the Get Directions button that we've added to this demo locator, but this could also be a custom button that you've added. Maybe it's an email to a sales rep or clicking on a different phone number, that kind of thing. What you can do here is the first thing we're going to do is preview, enable preview mode in our workspace, which I've already done in this example, and then I'm going to switch over to rich media, and my previewed interface. My tag assistant is connected, and I'm going to identify what I want to be tracked. In this example, I'm going to focus on this little address link. So when I click on this, I actually go to Google Analytics. Let's say I want to create an event in my Google Analytics based on that action. When I click on that, I can see that the window over on Google Tag Manager is blinking. It's trying to tell me something. It's because it's tracked a click event. And this is the event that we are going to use as a basis to track these events. So one of the easiest ways to track a button like this, which is kind of unique because it's interesting because the text of this button changes every time. And in this video, what we're going to actually leverage is the class of the event. This right here, this big blob, if this doesn't mean anything to you, you might need some help from a web developer to identify the appropriate CSS class to use to trigger the event. One kind of cheating way to do this is to look at the last class that begins with ML_, grab the dot and everything to the right. And so that is going to be one way of identifying this particular button. Let's look at some other click events just to kind of compare how they display. Let's click on details. That's actually an off-the-shelf event, but let's look at the click event. So notice the details button has a very different kind of layout. But all of these can be identified by either the text that's in the button, like the text that was actually clicked on, like the word details, or they can be identified by the CSS class. I'm kind of a tech guy, so I like the CSS class better. So now that I've grabbed that CSS class, I'm going to go over to Google Tag Manager, and I'm going to create a new trigger and a new tag. It's ultimately going to be a GA4 event tag. So I'm going to call this demo custom get directions event. And I'm going to once again create a GA4 event, and I'm going to point that at my GA4 configuration. And then I'm going to trigger this based on a new trigger, and that trigger is going to be somebody clicking on that directions link. So let's make a new trigger, and I'll call this the demo click get directions. And the configuration of this trigger is actually going to be, there's lots of trigger types that you can choose here. We've so far in these videos talked about custom events, but I'm actually going to use a click event. I'm going to use all elements. Just links is a little bit faster performance-wise, but all elements is a little bit safer because not everything that's clickable in MetaLocator is necessarily a link. But if you know what you're doing, you can make the appropriate choice there. So I don't want this to occur on all clicks. I only want this to occur on some clicks. And the way that I'm going to scope that down is by choosing that this should only occur when the click element matches this CSS selector. And this is what I copied and pasted. I'm going to remove this little D block at the end. The reason I'm removing that is you can actually control that in the interface settings, and I would hate for somebody to remove the display block option. I'm using ML full address link to directions, and then there's a little span within that. I could further, because I know it's a link, I could give it an A tag, but in this case, when we're first setting this up, less specific is probably better, and that will be sure that you're not being over specific and maybe specifying an incorrect CSS selector. But you don't want something so broad that it triggers when it shouldn't trigger. So go ahead and click save there, and then we're going to save this again. And then I forgot to provide the event name for the Google Analytics event. You may have remembered in our data layer ones, we were doing ML_, and then matching the name of event like click to call. This one, you can specify whatever you want, but again, I like to use ML_ for all these because that really lets me know that this is coming from MetaLocator, and I'll go ahead and hit save there. So now I can go ahead and I've made the changes, I've added the tag, I've created the trigger. I'm going to go ahead and preview this. So it's going to go ahead and connect to my rich media locator again, and go ahead and click continue there. And then within this, I'm going to go ahead and click on a few directions events. And so what I should see over here is a couple click events, and ML click and this click, but notice the click event that Google Tag Manager fired, notice the tag that was fired included this demo custom get directions event that we just created. And the fact that that tag ran should mean that we should also see this over in our GA4 debug preview. So let's go take a peek over there. Switching over to debug view, I can see that get directions is now showing up. That's great. That means that all the links in the chain are connected. We've got now get directions events appearing in GA4. And what's kind of fun when you know you've got this working right is to trigger a few kind of side by side, and you can really see kind of all the magic occur. So watch as I click these various events. You should see these actions occur over on the right. I can trigger additional get directions events. I can trigger additional open marker window events, and notice how they all kind of come flooding in just a few seconds after they occur. So as you can see, there's a few seconds that it takes to actually push through. And again, if you're not seeing anything here, the only thing I've noticed is that when you don't have anything selected there, you can have some problems. I'm not the only one who's noticed that there are some issues connecting here. This isn't a MetaLocator specific thing, but one thing that I had to do once was close everything down and go back in, and that seems to be the recommended way if you're having problems there. But the other places to look are to make sure that the configuration tag is pointing to the same GA4 property ID that you're recording events in, and that the biggest one is typically with custom events is that your CSS selectors aren't right. So the way that we did it in this video was we first made sure that the tag was actually being fired, and that's probably the most important thing that you can do. That means that you're capturing the event correctly and that the trigger is set up correctly. And then if nothing's showing up in here, it's probably an issue with the with either just signing out and coming back in, or the device not being selected here, or the wrong ID being set up. There's a lot that can happen inside Google Analytics. For example, you can have filters that may be excluding internal traffic, and the kind of list goes on. But that hopefully you're seeing those events at this time, and I hope this video series was helpful for you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out.